Welcome to West Virginia Beer Roads, a podcast all about beer from a West Virginia perspective. I'm Erin McCoy, here with my podcast partner, Charles Backway.
It's been about 3 years since we've sat down with the folks at Parkersburg Brewing Company to get an update on their operations and their beer. Well, wait no longer, because today we're visiting Parkersburg Brewing, their beautiful tap room in downtown Parkersburg, West Virginia. And I'm here with West Virginia Beer Road's co-host, Erin McCoy.
And joining us today on West Virginia Beer Roads are two of the people who keep this business moving ahead. First is Dan Curtis, an owner and founder of Parkersburg Brewing Company. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Erin.
Also here with us is John Cox, an owner and brewer at Parkersburg Brewing. John, welcome to West Virginia Beer Roads.
Yes, thank you.
Well, Parkersburg Brewing is now in its 7th year of operation. So, Dan, I'm going to begin with you. What's the ride been like?
It's been quite up and down, and I think probably the biggest part of the roller coaster was the introduction of COVID, and trying to learn how to deal with that. And I think, to be honest with you, Erin, we figured that one out pretty well. With the governor's order to be able to deliver beer. And then, using DoorDash, which, I got to give them a little bit of credit. During that period, they were not charging companies for the DoorDash services. So that was very, very beneficial to us from a taproom perspective. And obviously, the wholesale part of the business pretty much died during that period, right, with
Sure.
restaurants and, taverns and bars being closed. So that was very difficult. But I do have to say, we're probably right now in the most difficult and challenging part of our life cycle. We figured out COVID, but trying to figure out how to manage inflation, higher gas prices.
Moving on to the next problem.
And less expendable income is definitely a harder challenge to figure out, and we're working that day by day.
Well, we're glad to hear you're getting through that. John, I think you're a bit newer on the ownership team, but what's the experience of brewing at Parkersburg been like for you, and then what stood out the most?
Yes, I am new to the ownership. I started out here. They hired me as head brewer when they installed the 7-barrel system. So I started out as an employee, did that for about a year. They give me an opportunity to step up and buy into the business, and I did. So now I do a lot more work, and I don't get a paycheck.
Understood.
Oh, boy.
That kind of takes me then into my next question. What's been the most challenging things for you as a brewer?
The brewing doesn't really change. It's the same. It's a science. It's same products in, same products out. It's learning the business side. It's been a challenge for me, getting involved with other sides of the business. I'm now involved in sales and out on the road, meeting distributors. And, that's something I was never into before, something I never dreamed I would get into, but here I am doing it. So
Fantastic.
I've just been trying to embrace it and make the best of it.
When we hired John, chemical operators make excellent brewers. They understand equipment, they understand the process, they understand the science. But John has really grown and, developed over the last several years with the business side. And he's a very strong part of this business and something that we value significantly.
Very good. Well, we are sitting here again at Parkersburg Brewing in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and we have a beer that we are going to sample and would like to hear a little bit about. So, John, do you want to take this one?
Yes, this is our newest beer. This is a Kolsch. We call it Confluence Kolsch. What is it? 4.2, 4.4 ABV.
And the whole concept, right, around Confluence, right, is there's a couple of things, right? I mean, one is we really want to celebrate and basically encourage the coming together, right, of West Virginia University and Marshall, right, as a confluence, but also a confluence of domestic beer and craft beer. This is not a lager, right? but it is the lightest thing we can brew that's not a lager. And, we're, to be honest, we're really trying to come to the forefront here and answer part of the charge for some of the domestic beer challenges.
And as you said, as far as a domestic challenge, the Kolsch is great for a craft beer for someone who isn't necessarily into craft
Yes.
beer. It's a great introduction for them. And this, in particular, is very clear. It's clean and crisp and easy to drink. Anything else that you want to add about this specific
No, I mean,
one?
I think that's the important things, Aaron, right? Because up until we had the Kolsch, right, the only two options that we had for domestic drinkers was our Hefeweizen, which is not necessarily as clear and not as clean, right? And our Blonde on Blonde, which is kind of a niche coffee blonde. So this is our true, finally answer to domestic.
Yeah, this Confluence Kolsch, I get some kind of wininess in here, a little winey character. I think that's typical in some Kolsch. Also, a little greeniness that I love in this beer. It's very clean. It's extremely crystal clear.
And crushable, very crushable.
Yeah. And the ABV at 4.7, you say?
Yeah, I think it's 4.7.
Something like that. Anyway, yeah, I mean, that's right in the sweet spot, I think, what I like in Kolsch. And I know a lot of American brewers kind of up ABVs on everything, but you guys didn't, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same. It's quite good. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh, thank you.
Well, guys, since you've opened the brewery, the craft beer market has changed considerably. I think you'd have to agree. And Dan, I'd kind of like for you to give me your read on the overall craft beer market here in the summer of 2023.
Yeah, so Charles, that's an interesting question. The funny thing to me is IPAs continue to be a strong part of the market.
Boy, they do, don't they?
Yeah, there's always been talk about, the IPA fad, quote unquote, is going to die. It hasn't.
Right, it's extended.
We obviously offer, 3 IPAs, right? Our Citrus Tsunami, our Luponic, Hazy, and then our Pound A's Double IPA, and they all do very well. From a change perspective, to be honest, I haven't seen a ton of shift over the last 6+ years. People are always interested in new beers, new styles, but the base beers have continued to be strong.
Yeah, and I think, though, as West Virginia has moved up at getting more and more local breweries, when you guys started, there were quite a few less, I should say.
Yeah.
And it's definitely more people making more of the same kinds of beers.
Yes.
Do you think the market has grown here locally as much to absorb all those new beers that come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the market has grown. I think it's developed, it's grown, it's matured, and we continue to develop and bring out new beers. For example, earlier this year or late last year, I can't remember exactly, John, right? We brought out our Belgian Double, which has been very well
early this year.
very well received. I think, new beers, new styles are very well received, but I think the market has definitely matured to the point that it supports, more breweries and, more beers.
As you said previously regarding the IPAs, you mentioned the Luponic and the Citrus Tsunami and then the Pow Days. Are those flagships for Parkersburg Brewing?
So Tsunami and Pow Days are pretty much regular beers. Luponic, we've moved it to more of a seasonal type summer beer. So it's not available all year long, but it's a challenge, right? On how many SKUs do you carry all year long, and when do you bring in a new one? So that's probably one of our most significant challenges, I think, at this point, is managing how many beers you offer.
Learning curve.
And how you offer them, right? Keg, can, what have you.
Well, Parkersburg Brewing has chosen to distribute through partnerships with beer distributors rather than doing self-distribution. How's that working for you? Who wants to take this one? John?
Yeah, we're working with the distributors here in the state. Joe's Globe out of Morgantown, and Beverage Market out of Charleston. And Martin's over in the Panhandle.
So, Dan, did you want to add something?
So, yeah, Charles, I think a challenge, right, as a small brewery is there's so many trees between towns here in West Virginia.
That's so true.
To be able to self-distribute is a real challenge. And we decided that we really needed some help with distributors in the state. To be honest, it's been a challenge for us working with the distributors. But we're doing our best to make the best out of the situation that we have, and move as much beer as we can with the distributors that we chose.
And how are you staffing it internally to support distribution?
So currently, John pretty much takes care of that.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, it's pretty much me. I'm meeting with the distributors. I'm covering the festivals, doing that sort of thing. I try to meet with as many interim accounts as I can, but with the day job and things going on here, my time's limited. But I try to make the most of the time I can get on the road.
Yeah, and I know it's a challenge for all our brewers. When you use distributors that are far flung, like you said, the state is really spread out.
Yeah.
To be a small state, yes.
There's a lot of miles between accounts sometimes, but there's also a lot of miles between your distributors that you have to try to support.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I just wondered though what your take is on what distributors and retailers are wanting today. And how's that maybe different from what you saw when you first started Parkersburg Brewing?
They're still pretty much wanting our flagship staples. Cell Block 304 and Citrus Tsunami is what we lead with. That really hasn't changed.
Okay.
We have asked for more of a crossover beer, which is where the idea of the Kolsch come up. They're asking for something that domestic drinkers would step up and buy.
And I think that's been received very, very well by our distributors.
Yes.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, you guys decided to enter the Ohio market, right?
We did.
Am I correct with that? Yeah. And it's just across the river from here in Parkersburg. If people don't know where Parkersburg, West Virginia is, it's right on the Ohio River, and Ohio's right to the west. So how's that developing?
So it's been slow. During COVID, we had some issues with the Ohio, I don't know what they call themselves, but the equivalent of the West Virginia Alcohol Beverage Commission.
Right, regulators.
They had some legitimate resourcing issues, and we ran into some struggles with licensing. So we've taken a pause in Ohio. We intend to go back to Ohio, but right now we haven't done that yet.
It's not on your end, though. That's on their end because of staffing issues or resources.
Yeah. So we've been focusing primarily on West Virginia until we get that straightened out.
Yeah, and the last thing I'm kind of curious about with your work in distribution are chain authorizations, because that's such a critical part often when you work with distributors to get in the major retailers. Who wants to take that one? John?
I'll let John take that.
Yeah, and we've actually had some pretty good conversations over the last year and a half. We have a very good relationship with Parmar. We have a very good relationship with Kroger. We're with BFS and GoMart. So we are definitely trying to grow those relationships.
Yeah, that's good that you're seeing progress and support there from those key retailers, because those big chains, they do move a lot of beer in our state.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, and we've had some success with Walmart. It's been store by store, but we're continuing to work that as well.
Okay.
Well, summer is typically the best season for beer sales. What 2 or 3 beers have been your hottest sellers recently in off-premise grocery and convenience stores, which you were just discussing?
Well, again, we go back to the Kolsch. Since we released that around a month ago, that beer's been on fire. We have a waiting list, people wanting it.
So it's surpassed what you said you typically lead with, which is your
yes.
cell block and
Yeah.
your,
Yes.
your tonic.
Yes, right now the Kolsch is on fire. We're waiting to see if it's just because it's something new we've put out or if it's going to have staying power. So we're following that very close.
And hopefully following up as far as sales goes.
Yes,
Get you
Yeah.
a third regular beer
Yeah,
in there.
yeah. But
Yes.
I think in general, the Tsunami and the Cell Block continue to be, the staples. But the Kolsch is
Quickly.
it's a quick up and comer. Yes.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and I think that's probably helped a lot by the fact that I see a lot more of even our small breweries in West Virginia, which were kind of off, the mainstream sometimes. A lot of them are making Kolsch, and they're making pretty good Kolsch. And so our market's getting familiar with it, where they used to not know what a Kolsch was.
Right. But I think the beauty of a Kolsch is it's so close to a domestic. Because we live in a domestic world.
Well, what about on-premise bars and restaurants? Have you had any sales surprises that you didn't have in your off-premise grocery and convenience stores?
The tap rooms, pretty much the people that come in here are hardcore craft beer drinkers. They lean
Got
toward
your regulars.
Yes, they lean toward the IPAs.
Well, and the new stuff. So the wholesale accounts that are buying kegs, a lot of those places, right, whether it's a Pies and Pints or whatever, right, they're really interested in some of the new stuff. You don't really get to push some of the new stuff quite as much in retail space, right, as you do on premise. So they're similar to the tap room, but in the tap room we can really experiment and do things and draw people in, and that's what we try to do.
Are you seeing particular style shifts in customer preferences that are happening right now? And if so, which styles are you seeing trending up? What are you seeing trending down?
And not really. In my opinion, I would call it pretty stable. I mean, IPAs are still king. Everybody wants an IPA.
They are. But you do see a very thirsty group for variety and new things. And I think our Belgian Double in the tap room specifically, because that's really the only place that we provided it, was very well received and high demand. So I think they want to see variety.
So variety is definitely that trend.
Yep.
And this brings up a question to me, guys, on just the fact that you guys at Parkersburg Brewing don't have 20, 30, 40 beer styles that you make, around the clock or in a season, like so many of our brewers are just cranking out a new beer, every few weeks almost. How did you decide to do that and make that your business model?
Well, so I think that's a pretty easy answer, Charles, and that is, how do you manage 30 or 40 beer styles and SKUs and actually make enough to provide your tap room or your distributors? I think with our 15 plus probably styles that we provide, we continue to struggle, right, on how do you provide enough, right? And how do you read the crystal ball on what your distributor wants? So to simplify that model, I think makes life a whole lot easier.
And that's kind of brings me to my last question on this topic, but do you feel like overall your customer base style preferences for variety is pretty stable across the region, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, I feel it's pretty stable. There are definitely pockets in West Virginia.
From a sales standpoint?
Yes.
From you, John?
Yes. Morgantown is a hot spot. Fairmont is a hot spot.
College.
Yeah. The southern part of the state is not really into the craft beers yet, but we are getting some traction with these crossover beers, and
But there is some regional differences.
yeah,
as you're
there's definitely some regional differences, but you know.
And I wonder how much of those regional differences are due to distributors pushing a certain beer that you have versus it actually being demanded in the market, and that's why the difference is.
Yeah,
I
so
wonder,
that's a good question.
How do you figure that out?
That's a
Yeah.
good question, Charles. And I mean, just an example. So in Man, West Virginia, right, which is a very, very small town in southern West Virginia, cell block is king. And I think it's king, right, because of the Hatfield-McCoy trails and people coming in from out of state, D.C., other things, right, and they love that brown ale. So it really depends on what's going on in that particular area.
Sure.
Well, Parkersburg Brewing has been one of only a few West Virginia brewers to emphasize a seltzer in their beer catalog. Talk about why you decided to do this, and then tell me about how it's going.
That actually was a personal conversation between myself and a friend of mine at work. He asked me why I had my head so far up my ass that we weren't doing anything with seltzers. So we decided to do a little bit of investigation and work. At the time, the seltzer market was really growing, and especially in the golfer, the golf part of the, and it's a nice, light, easy drinking, 4 to 5% ABV drink. So we decided to do that work. We're pretty proud of the seltzer that we produced. However, I will say that market, especially now with all these other, hard options, if you will, is so diluted that it's a very hard market to compete in. So we've decided that we're going to quit pretty much distributing seltzer in cans. And we still offer it here in the tap room. It's a great gluten-free option that we've had certified in the brewery. People love it, and we continue to serve it here. But we do continue to offer it in kegs from distribution standpoint, but we've stopped canning seltzer.
Aaron McCoy and I are here at Parkersburg Brewing Company in downtown Parkersburg, West Virginia, talking with Dan and John, two of the owners here, and we're going to now take a break, and while Dan or John one pours us another little sample, a beer number 2, and when we get that poured, we'll be right back to talk about it. Okay, we're back, and we have a nice, richly brown beer poured in front of us right now. Dan, what are we drinking?
Yeah, so Charles, this is our black IPA. It's a very earthy, chalky, nice, hopped, bitter IPA.
Yeah, that's really well flavored. Some black IPAs are a little light and just heavy on bitterness, but this one you get a good balance of the bitterness with the malt.
What's the ABV on this one?
I believe that one's 7.1, 7.2.
It's very smooth and easy to drink, and certainly doesn't come across as that high of an ABV.
No, it doesn't. Right.
Yeah. Well, black IPA. Let's talk about some other new and upcoming beers.
Yes, I mean one of our new ones is that Belgian Double that we've talked about. I mean, right now we're only offering it in the tap room. It's been very well received, but we are working on I would call a pretty exciting collaboration with a local company here, a donut place that's been around forever, and we're going to be taking our base beer, the Mojo Coffee Stout, and doing a pretty interesting collaboration with a local donut company.
What would any city be? What would any city be without a donut company or two? I mean, come on. So how are they going to get the Mojo up there?
Yeah, so I mean, we're infusing donuts and chocolate, and it's going to be a really exciting beer. We're actually just now starting the development of that beer in our pilot system.
I see.
So by this fall, we should have that beer out. I'm pretty excited about it, and so is the donut company. That we're
Oh, I'm
working
sure.
with.
Do you have a name?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not
Okay.
yet.
Well,
We're
folks,
working on it. Yeah.
hopefully we'll watch their social media and maybe even
Yeah.
Brilliant Stream's social media, and we'll have
Yeah.
to make sure we announce when that.
Yes, no, definitely.
that beer
We'll
comes
keep
out.
we'll keep you informed. It's just a little bit early to share the name of the donut company,
Yeah.
and we don't have a name of
That's
the beer
fine.
yet, but definitely we'll share that when the time is right.
Okay.
Well, kind of in the same wheelhouse. I know it's been a minute since we last talked with you, but if I recall correctly, there was obviously discussion regarding Cell Block 304 and maybe an international collaboration that you were considering. And I'm just curious if you could maybe touch on that.
Yeah, so we actually did do an international collaboration with a brewery in Ireland. John, do you want to talk? You actually went over there as well.
Yeah. So I went over to Ireland and worked with Larkin's Brewery over there in Kilcool, Ireland, and we brewed together a traditional braggot, which is an old traditional drink from Ireland. Yep, and they
Yeah,
actually
go ahead and explain what a braggot is.
Right, for listeners.
a braggot is kind of a mix between an ale and a mead. It's it's honey based,
So very sweet,
very sweet,
high ABV, I'm assuming?
very high ABV.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as far as visual for our listeners, can you describe kind of how that
Yeah,
turned
very
out?
golden, kind of more like a barley wine.
But
than the
clear.
beer. Yes,
And
clear.
little head.
Clear, golden. Yes, very good head retention.
So the cool part is when we saw one on tap that it was actually being served in Russia. Yeah, so that was really pretty wild.
But originated in Ireland.
Yeah, yeah,
And they
yeah,
distributed to Russia.
yeah.
Yes, that beer actually out of Larkin's there in Kilcool. That beer, to my understanding, ended up in like a dozen different countries throughout Europe.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got to watch those check-ins as people did their social
yeah.
media.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Well,
Is-
that had to be a first for West Virginia.
Oh,
Brewery.
absolutely.
I would think, but it was super cool to be involved in that and watch it and go to Ireland. I mean, we all
yeah.
were there, and just the cultural differences and things was just a great experience.
And for our listeners, again, I know it's been a while since we've talked with you. What year did this occur?
That was right before COVID hit.
yeah, so
2019.
2019, yeah.
Yep, 2019.
Yeah.
Any plans for follow-up collabs with international
I will
brewers?
definitely be going back to Ireland. Had an absolute blast over there. I hung out for 8 days, hung out with them guys, had a great time.
I imagine you had a fantastic time. How much of
yeah.
it you remember is a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. But
Yeah. Made some great friends and contacts, and saw.
And they're a
Great.
great brewery. Larkin's Brewery is a great place. That's a possibility in the future. We just haven't got over the COVID hump yet.
But you
right?
still develop,
But,
or
yeah.
you still you maintain a good relationship
Oh,
with
yes.
them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's wonderful to hear.
Well, guys, West Virginia has adopted a number of newer alcohol laws since you guys have been in business here in Parkersburg. Are there any laws or regulation changes that stand out to you as significant improvements over the last few years?
I mean, for me, Charles, I think the brunch bill was a big good thing for us on Sundays here in the tap room.
Yeah, and that was one that allowed you to sell beer early on a
Yes.
Sunday.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I think that was great. I think one that we haven't taken a lot of advantage of yet is where a private resort hotel to have interconnection with a resident brewer. That change, we tried that before that change was made. We weren't successful, and we have yet to retry that post-COVID. I think, I mean, to me, honestly, the maximum alcohol content of 15%. Okay, that's cool, but I mean, how many beers are we going to brew at 15%? Not
right.
many, if any, right? So, I mean, that's nice, right, to lift those kind of limitations, but
Yeah.
I don't think that one is super important to us.
Well, some of the, like in this last session, they did allow brewers now to have more than one location, which you couldn't do that before.
Right,
And
yes.
I know you guys
Yeah.
have dabbled around a bit in the Parkersburg the Morgantown market.
Yes.
Is anything possible up there? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I don't want to say too much right now. I mean, we are looking at some possibilities of a second location, but it's so early that I don't want to share too much
That's
at this
okay.
point.
That's
No, I
fair.
understand. So let's get back to legislation then.
Yeah.
Are there any other kind of legal roadblocks that you'd like to see busted, or are you pretty happy with the level that our state laws are right now?
To me, I think, Charles, one of the frustrating pieces is the price change, regulations and rules around the ABCA.
Licensing, you mean?
No, price changes.
Yeah, to
Oh.
change the price on what you sell is
Yes,
what you're saying.
yes,
I
yes.
understand.
You have to
To change the
file in
price.
West Virginia. We have to file a sale price, or a brewer does.
Yes, and it's at least a quarter that you have to wait for that to be approved. So, for example, right, if you make a mistake on pricing a new beer
Sure.
and it's a bad mistake, you're going to pay the price for at least a quarter.
Oh
And
yeah.
that adds up quickly.
No, it does.
Yeah.
So to me, that's probably one of the most frustrating pieces of the current regulations that we have.
So, John, this one is for you initially, and then we'll see if Dan has anything to add. So,
I always have things to add.
let's take a big picture look at Parkersburg Brewing and its business model for the beer that it makes. How would you describe the overall brewing philosophy, and how has it developed throughout the years?
I don't know that it's developed. We've been the same from day one. We stress quality and we stress consistency. If you have one of our beers made 3 years ago and you come back, we want that to be the exact same beer.
That's what beer drinkers want to hear, I would assume.
So I will add, I totally agree with John. However, I think we have developed some, right? I think, we have learned over the last 6 years certain things about, how we control diacetyl and different things in the fermentation process. And we've gotten better, right? Now, it's all about science. It's all about data, right? And I think, we continue to strive to get better. But I also agree with John. It's, there's a lot of things that we do the exact same way we did when we started, right? And it's all about consistency and quality. And I think consistency we've got down pretty well. It's the quality piece that I think we've had down very well, but we continue to try to strive to drive to the next level.
Well, your downtown brew pub has always been a big part of your business model. How's it doing today?
So the brew pub's doing pretty well. Again, right as we talked earlier, post-COVID, things were booming. People wanted to get out,
Oh, yeah.
right? They
Yes.
wanted to get out. Then you get inflation, increase in gas prices, things start to drop, so we've had to get creative, right, with how we draw people into the tap room and how we maximize foot traffic. But in general, I feel that we've done pretty well. And this tap room is a daily, revenue source for us, right? Where from a wholesale perspective, you get orders, on some sort of frequency, but not daily. So it is an important part of the business for us.
How do you manage the food side? I know how you manage the beer side, but how do you manage the food side? I mean, that's often a place that at least some people, they lose money on food, and that's what puts them out of business,
Yeah, so I think we've been pretty smart with our metrics and how we manage the food side of the business. It is definitely a challenge. We continue to work on that every day. But I think we've got a good model. I think we've learned a lot over the last 6 years. And to be honest, I think we manage this business just as good as anybody else running a restaurant in this area.
And I know we've talked about this in past years as we've either written articles about Parkersburg Brewing or talked to you on a podcast, but you were kind of an urban pioneer here. You moved into a part of town that the city needed, to have a business that was a draw to bring people down. I mean, how have you found that experience here in downtown Parkersburg? And maybe what do you look for in the future?
So it's been a challenge. We've been very committed to revitalizing downtown Parkersburg. We feel like we are a pioneer. We work with any and every business that comes downtown, right, to try to collaborate and continue to grow what we have downtown. But it's slow. And to be honest, it's a little bit frustrating, but, we continue to push the mantra and, try to continue to be the source for bringing people downtown.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a common theme among certainly certain small breweries in our state where the cities themselves aren't bringing more people in. I mean, they're losing population, and I'm not up to date on Parkersburg in your area exactly, but my guess would be that it's not growing at the moment. And when people put breweries in those towns, I mean, it can be tough. I mean, because the overall economy is not really working in your favor.
No, exactly. We continue the push, we continue the drive. So far we've been successful, and we will continue to try to develop downtown Parkersburg and, bring it back.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because breweries are a draw, and they're something that a community really needs. A small brew pubs and restaurants like you're running, and it makes a big difference to the attractiveness these days of a downtown, and I hope they appreciate that.
Yeah, so it's funny, and when it wasn't too long after we opened, there was a young girl that came in here that used to live in Parkersburg that was living in New York.
Totally moved.
And she came in, and it was kind of funny because, everybody's eating, they're drinking, and real loud. She was just a loud girl.
She became a real New Yorker.
She's like, oh, my God. I don't even feel like I'm in Parkersburg anymore, So it's a neat atmosphere we have here.
Well, it is.
And people like it.
Yeah.
Well, and as Charles said, you put a brewery in a town, and the idea is that absolutely, I know it's going to bring craft beer people, but also it's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring hopefully other businesses, and then people grow around that community, and it supports itself.
Yeah.
And which was Charles's point.
So let me make this comment. When we first opened, in 2016, our intent was to be a brewery that had a little bit of food. And I think we learned very quickly in our demographic that you can't survive like that. You have to be a restaurant that, by the way, has some pretty good beer. So we shifted our focus very quickly to be able to survive in that environment.
Yeah. I know you guys all, at least most of you, came from kind of either scientific or industry backgrounds that, weren't related to brewing, but you were very scientific oriented. And how has that impacted the way you decided and continued to operate your business?
So I think the scientific piece has fell very well into the brewing part. The restaurant part, science doesn't really apply. However, right, we're all...
Chef may argue with you on that one.
However, I know, but however, we're all consumers,
yes,
right?
We are.
So I think for us, right, the restaurant and the tap room piece was, what do we like, right? What do we not like? And trying to build the atmosphere and the tap room and the restaurant piece around what a consumer's like. And, we spend a lot of time with our servers, especially with doing training on the experience, right? From the time you walk in that door until the door hits your hind end on the way out, right? It's got to be a positive experience. And so we do a lot of training on that. I think that's what makes us successful here, is, we want something that we want to come to, and I think it's pretty much what the others enjoy as well.
I hope that training involves training your staff on your craft beer so that they can describe it well, more in particular to those customers that are not really aware of what craft is, or maybe they're coming in for the first time. That's so important.
No, exactly, Aaron.
And there's definitely a need for improved education in that area from my standpoint.
No, I agree. And we continue to work on that. There's nothing that frustrates me more than as a craft beer drinker to go to a establishment and ask them, what kind of IPAs do you have? And they say, well, I have a Bud Light. Well, no, that's not an IPA, right? So, so I think education is extremely important.
Well, we've been sitting here inside the brew house, more or less, here at the brewery, and it's been a great experience to record a podcast with all the tanks around, and of course we got a little...
And literally the bar and customers behind us.
Yeah, that's right.
Before we wrap up today's interview, are there any other future plans for the brewery that you want to tell us about?
No, I don't think we have anything to announce. Yes, we've always said our dream is to max out this place and move to a bigger facility. That's still our dream. That's still where we want to get to. Just nothing we're ready to announce on that.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some things we're working on, but we're just not ready to talk about them yet.
But you still have confidence in the local craft beer market and its future?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We have confidence in the market. We have confidence in our products. So, we're going to continue the march and grow this business as much as we can.
Well, Dan Curtis and John Cox of Parkersburg Brewing Company, thank you so much for joining us today on West Virginia Beer Roads. We have had a fantastic time. Appreciate your time.
Yes,
thank you.
Good luck going forward.
Thank you.
This brings us to the close of another podcast. Remember, you can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast host. Thank you for listening to West Virginia Beer Roads.
West Virginia Beer Roads is a production of BrilliantStream.com.